Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Brock Beard from LastCar.info coming at you after the conclusion of the inaugural Chicago Street Course race, where after a weekend of record rain, numerous delays, just about everything under the sun, illegal street racing overnight, probably a crazier weekend than just about anybody predicted on this. Shane Van Gisbergen has scored his first Cup win in his first career start, the first driver to do so since Johnny Rutherford in 1963, the first time since 1953 that the number 91 has gone to victory lane, and the first time since 1973 that a so-called road course ringer, that is a part-timer, not just a driver with road course experience, but one specifically brought on to run a road course with Mark Donohue in 1973 at Riverside. I believe that's the last time that's happened. We've had drivers like Marcus Ambrose and others come through here, but to win a Cup Series race, massive, just a massive moment for the sport, certainly in its perception internationally, certainly in the perception of putting together this street race, which had so many things going against it politically, and then the weather, and just concerns, just doubts, just questions. And I've had my share of questions about this event as well. To have it concluded with this most unbelievable of circumstances. And also give a call to the only open entry in the list. We have chartered teams out there. Yes, this is another Trackhouse entry. And yes, it is the second straight win for Trackhouse. Congratulations to them on that as well. But this is tremendous in so many ways. I have heard for so many years growing up, seeing races at Sears Point, and hearing about road course specialists coming in. You got guys like Chris Cook and Ron Fellows and Boris Said and Tommy Kendall, some of these other drivers. And, it used to be back then that you would have these drivers come in because Cup Series regulars, some of them, would not enjoy running road courses or just weren't very good at it. Drivers like Sterling Marlin, Jimmy Spencer, many others there along the way. And so we would get these different drivers out there. And I always was frustrated by the gripe that people would say, where it'd be like, oh, well, they never have a chance to win. They're never going to win. Why are they even out there? But there would be a lot of them that would come close. And in that time since 73, so many of them have, and some getting much more attention than others. 1991, Tom Kendall drives in place of Kyle Petty at Sears Point. Comes down to the final few laps there, him running against Mark Martin. The couple of them hook bumpers, cuts down a tire on Kendall's car. He said he wanted to lap the field at Watkins Glen that year. Unfortunately, he had his bad accident at the Glen that summer. Didn't get really another chance to do so. It wasn't the same after that accident. Scott Pruitt, 2004, had one of the best cars in the field. Just happened to be one where Jeff Gordon had the field completely covered in that. But it was something that was certainly overlooked. And then in 2003, Boris Said, driving in place of an injured Jerry Nadeau, wins the pole for MB2 Motorsports, leads some laps in that race. Ron Fellows is out there driving in place of Steve Park after he's released by DEI. Fellows completes a 3-wide pass for the lead, trying to get his first win. Both of them coming up short, ultimately because of pit strategy at the end of the race there. Cautions just didn't fall their way. They finished 6th and 7th. Fellows himself finishing 2nd at Watkins Glen twice in his career. So close to winning against Tony Stewart in 2005, Jeff Gordon in 1999. There have been so many road course specialists that even if they only ran 1 or 2 races a year, were more than justified in their efforts to actually try to compete. And it's wonderfully vindicating to see a driver absolutely take the entire weekend here. I know these broadcasters are getting tongue twisted saying his name as often as it was, and we're just getting down to just saying SVG by the end. But they're going to have to get used to saying his name a lot more because, that guy, he has raised the bar here in terms of road course competition, in particular. We talked back at COTA about, all the different, restarts and how drivers like Jenson Button and Kimi Räikkönen were frustrated over the lack of civility among the Cup Series drivers, that it was a little bit too physical for them. We think back to Sears Point and then Martin Truex Jr. dominating that field and, wondering why nobody else was ever, able to seem to really kind of compete with him. We've heard every little thing about it on the road courses this year. But with Shane Van Gisbergen coming out there and really just a tremendous race there at the end. And again, no disrespect to the other competitors out there. Justin Haley in particular was very impressive. That battle that the two of them had, if Haley's tires were just a little bit fresher, if the circumstances were maybe just a little bit different, but that's in road course racing. And again, thankfully we didn't have the stage cautions to screw all that up. It was bad enough we had to have an overtime finish there. But allowing the strategy to work out, and yes, there were some wrinkles in that with shortening the race too. But at least at the there was opportunities to try different things there at the end. And it certainly wasn't a situation that immediately put Gisbergen in a place where he was just going to be dominant and nobody else was able to catch him. He had to actually claw his way through there and pretty much had Haley passed at the moment that green-white checkered had started there after the Bubba Wallace and Stenhouse incident. But just massive. I mean, this is just massive, and I think it is a firm answer to, really, again, to the history of road course ringers. It resets the clock on that. And again, to the further ability of the sport to attract international talent. We got Kamui Kobayashi coming up here at the Indy Road Course in a few weeks. Yes, that's with 23XI, but even better, we got other teams that are potentially doing this. And how wonderful it would be if this was more common. Project 91, for example, wasn't at Sears Point this year. They didn't have one of their drivers in there. It was something that these teams can't really afford to do. And it was very much brought up in a lot of these discussions on social media here, how little these open teams make, even if it is an expansion team to a chartered entry. When you have a result like this, it really shows the importance of having a very deep and competitive field, because we are not in a Cup Series era like we had back in the 1990s, where a road course ringer would generally take the place of a driver. Yes, we had people like Andy Lally for maybe some of the smaller teams out there, like Rick Ware Racing. But it's not in place of a driver that's usually a full-time guy going for the championship. Again, a Jimmy Spencer or Sterling Marlin type from a different era there. So you have to have more entries. And for that to happen, it's never going to happen unless it becomes more profitable to operate an open team, or there's just a complete restructuring of the current charter system out here, because it would be wonderful to extend these opportunities. It was discussed at the end of this here by the broadcasters there, and in celebrating with him in Victory Lane. Oh, wouldn't it be great if you got a full-time ride in the Cup Series? It shouldn't take that. It would be nice. I think one thing that would make it great in the sport is if you had drivers that were able to specialize on certain tracks. Do you really want to have a situation? It would be great, to have somebody like that. Maybe they're able to adjust to a full-time Cup schedule, but that's a heck of a grind. And then going for the championship and the playoffs and the current restructuring with all the absurdities in there. I'm thinking of like how AJ Allmendinger has generally been struggling this year, where it was expected, where he went from just running the road courses to the full-time season. And really, more often than not, he hasn't been the worst out there, but not nearly as even. I think it's kind of struggled with his road course performance too. We didn't really see him as much of a factor even in this race. So I think that's something that maybe, it's like, why does that have to be the ultimate goal of this? Just have specialized drivers. You have different people that come into the short tracks. You should be different people that would come to Michigan. You have people that are from the region that would be able to compete. We still see some of that in the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series. Even this past week with even with this particular race, you had Brent Sherman coming out of complete oblivion, where he hadn't even been in an Xfinity ride since 2007, hadn't been in Cup since 2006, and he comes back out there, and because it's in his hometown, he gets to start a race. It's great. He was able to do that in Xfinity. No way on heck was he going to be able to do that in the Cup Series, not without a massive sponsor and something to offset the paltry amount that the open teams are getting paid in there. So this is a supreme moment in the sport that and we haven't even really talked about the international aspect of it yet, which is huge in its own right, and we'll get to that too. But really, for the future of the sport and what kind of dynamics they want to have in this, that if you want to have a guy that comes in there and challenges all comers, literally did that in this case. not just the fact that you had Shane come in there and in an open entry that only had a couple of starts this year, and yes, affiliated with Trackhouse, the Trackhouse effort, but to come in there and then go against all 36 of the regular drivers, including swapped into one of those being Jenson Button, and a Formula One world champion. That's massive. That's a huge accomplishment. And knowing how much hype there was behind this race, knowing how much pressure that drivers were putting on each other to win this event, how Denny Hamlin felt when he won the pole yesterday, how incredibly proud he was of that accomplishment, and how much he wanted to really build on that. How that was an accomplishment in itself. I mean, it kind of reminds me of what had happened at other tracks where they were equally prestigious, or they really kind of leaned into it more. Yeah, I mean that's huge. And yes, so let's get to the international aspect of it here. This is something that I think NASCAR was probably hoping for, is creating a car that was closer to what you would have in international sports cars. Now, I mean, how successful that has been accomplished, I mean, I'm not going to pretend that a next-gen car is exactly the same as a Australian supercar. Certainly isn't. There's very clear differences. And actually, I wish that the broadcast would have done a little bit more of that to really kind of get into the nuts and bolts of that and really kind of discuss the differences, to really address how it's not just what side of the car you're on. It's a little bit more complicated than that. But to get international competitors interested in this, because you always have things like IMSA and Trans Am, and you bring all kinds of drivers from around the world and try to figure out who's the best of it. I was, again, thinking back to my time in covering World Touring cars, and yeah, that's not, that's kind of an intermediate thing there between, kind of more, 24 Hours Le Mans and like really expensive prototype work and all that, but still attracted an international group of drivers. And, and again, you look at Formula One, you look at IndyCar, you look at other sports that have an international contingent. In fact, it was kind of a story in IndyCar this week that they had an all-American front row because they have such an international cast of drivers there. I don't know if NASCAR is ever going to get to that point. I don't think they should force things to that point. But I think in an environment that welcomes all comers, and if you have 50 people show up to a race, only, I'd like to believe it would be more like 40 or 43 drivers would qualify instead of just 36. But a situation where you have people really, really kind of challenge each other and really kind of elevate the skill level of our current drivers, it's great. I think when it happens unnaturally, we've seen it not quite work out. You think about 2008 with the open wheel invasion back then. A lot of those drivers lost sponsors or lost rides, or in the case of Dario Franchitti, just believed it was a career mistake and came back in an IndyCar and was better than ever. Which is why I think the focus shouldn't be as much on full-time drivers. Not that they wouldn't be capable of it. Who knows if Shane Van Gisbergen gets, Gisbergen, see, I'm getting tongue twisted now, has trouble getting into a full-time effort there. Again, I don't think that should necessarily be the goal. Let's just try getting them in more road course races. I mean, if you got Watkins Glen coming up, you got the Indy road course. We'll see. I mean, is it just as much just the street course aspect and how much of the schedule is that in the Australian touring cars, or so forth. But I think that would be another place to really look at it there too. But Shane Van Gisbergen, I mean, just tremendous effort out there. I mean, absolutely just impressive. I've already seen the comments here. Yeah, I've already stopped it. It's just Gisbergen. Okay, there you go. Well, I put it on the screen here because I felt like, pretty much everybody's going to have to get used to this name here already. But absolutely fantastic. Yeah, Jeff Burton was having even more trouble with it for sure. But yeah, definitely everybody was comfortable with SVG by the end of that deal there. But yeah, this is just tremendous. And I'm so glad that after everything that was happening this weekend, that there's something positive, very positive to glean from it here. Yes, they had to shorten the race by 25 laps, but really, actually, in hindsight, 100 laps kind of felt a little bit too long. I felt like we got plenty of experience from the 75 laps in this. I guess 78 laps. We had the overtime finish on top of it. But yeah, it's huge. It's huge. This is huge for, again, it's going to, this is going to do more to encourage international competitors to try NASCAR than NASCAR just saying the market will sell itself. Because now you're going to have other guys in other disciplines, or, and I say guys, I mean, it doesn't have to be just, be male drivers, of course, it could be anybody. I mean, anybody from other disciplines want to try their hand at it. And not saying that this is the top echelon in every country. It doesn't have to be. For some people, their goal was IndyCar. For some, it's Formula One or whatever. But this is going to be huge if NASCAR and the media partners and all that handle it correctly. It's going to be something that's going to be able to kind of bring them back in there. So I think that's going to be huge there. So we'll certainly find out what happens there. But just remarkable and so exciting there at the end of it there too. In terms of the overall race itself, I mean, it did kind of stretch out here and there. I think it was reasonable to expect that it was going to be just kind of single file for a lot of the race there, especially with how you did have some wide portions of the track, but especially those last couple of turns, it just gets so narrow by the city front there. You had kind of a situation where not only was it very tight, but it was also very wet, and you had a lot of drivers that had kind of problems in those areas there. Poor Noah Gragson was just having an awful time there, handling all of that here at the same time. But it's just kind of a different set of circumstances here for all these different competitors. But you had some challenges. You definitely had some drivers who were running into the tire barriers. But it wasn't something that ended their day. I really expected with the issues of the toe links was going to be absolutely central. Like that everybody was just going to be treating the outside walls like it was just, molten lava, and everybody was going to be driving maybe a little bit too carefully around there because they were so worried about breaking a toe link and not being able to get back out there. We saw certainly a bit of that in practice and qualifying. But in the race, I didn't feel like that restricted the action as much there. It seemed like actually quite the opposite. It seemed like basically most of the time, except for Ryan Blaney's incident, which did drop him laps down and pretty much took him out of contention. Anybody that kind of glanced into those tire barriers, even pried him back off the ground, were still able to get a good finish here at the same time. Looks like I need to deputize somebody else here. If somebody wants to be a moderator here, just let me know in the chat, and I'll jump that there. I don't want to deputize somebody if they don't want to do that, but just mentioned there. But really, just absolutely a crazy situation. Thank you, Ben. I'll get you here. Can I do that from here? Boop. Oh, come on. I don't want to ruin the flow here a little bit, but I'll try to make sure I could get this set up here. Checking this out. Okay, there you go. Boop. There we go. Sorry, folks, we just got to get a little bit of... I'm not used to having this many people in the chat. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning up here. But we'll add a couple here, and that'll kind of take care of that. So I do apologize for that, folks. We usually have about 50 or 60 people in here, so my goodness, we're up to, again, the Van Gisbergen effect here, for sure. We'll add a couple more here for you. There you go. And we'll see how that goes. Boom. Hopefully that works out okay. All right, we still live? Okay, good. I don't want to lose track of it here. All righty. So, and basically, on that. Thank you there. Really, the only, and again, I will break the fourth wall here a little bit. For the moderators there, really just anything is distracting. Just that's about the only issue, the only rule I really have here in the chat. Just anybody that's spamming like that, that's the only issue I have. But beyond that, I'm not worried about anything. I like to keep things pretty relaxed here and that. So we'll go from there. But thank you to the both of you on that. So let's see. To kind of jump back into it here. So the race itself. So the last place battle turned out to go quite a bit longer than I thought it was going to. I thought this was going to be very short, like the Xfinity race one turned out to be. But in reality, things changed quite a bit. Let me get into my notes. Unfortunately, my Twitter has not exactly covered itself in glory this weekend, and I'm afraid I had the same problems there at the end. That's why my feed wasn't posting anything really the last couple laps. Not that it was any any less exciting. It absolutely quite the opposite. It was tremendous. But let's see here. But really, at the end of the day, there with the other drivers that were at the back of the pack, Eric Almirola spun out at the beginning. Kyle Busch plowed up the barriers and did not lose a lap. Came very close to it by replacing the hood pins in the car. Justin Haley was actually your last place starter in this race and incurred a tail end penalty for grazing the wall and some unapproved adjustments from that. So that dropped him to the back of the pack from the very beginning of this deal. Came back out there and was able to kind of claw his way back up, which meant Kyle Busch was in the back. Then Noah Gragson with the first of, I believe, 3 cautions he was in, where he plowed up the tire barriers there. Just had a rough afternoon, which is too bad because it looked like he had a really successful ad campaign. I mean, my gosh, he's been like one of the hardest working pitchmen I can remember since Kenny Wallace in terms of like really promoting the brands that are partnering with him. Certainly the paint scheme, the bacon paint scheme. I gotta find where he had that merch there. I thought that was really cool. I was going to wear a 42 shirt today, but I had to bring this one out here after the results of the Xfinity race for sure. It was just so good to see, because we had. It was good to see, Gragson having a good time, especially after the result of, his concussion there at Gateway. I did not like seeing him struggle out here. That was not to say that was good to see, but regardless, he was your last place contender there for a bit. As I was pulling that up, it seemed like the 42 is actually pretty rare as a last place number in the field out there. But regardless, he was last place for a little bit before Ryan Blaney bounced off the wall, damaged the right front. Seemed like he was really having a toe link issue there. Certainly dropped him off the pace. And then he was last place pretty much until the Alex Bowman-Denny Hamlin incident. Bowman spun out in, I believe, turn 11, stalled the car there, tried to get back going, made it to pit road. And then shortly after, there was smoke coming out from under the engine there. Something spun backwards there in the engine. And that ended his night. He was towed behind the wall at about the opening in the outside wall there, and was, last I saw, about like 30 or 40 laps to go, his car was still sitting there on the hook. I don't know if that changed with all the chaos that was happening in the first couple corners there at the end, but that was the situation. So Alex Bowman, only the second last place finish that he's had in the number 48 car, but the 7th overall that he's had in the Cup Series, which kind of goes... kind of a combination, not just of his efforts in Hendrick, but of course you think back to earlier in his career with BK Racing and so forth. So a little more of a competitive last place battle there, but Bowman being your last place finisher in this event here too. But we're not done talking about Shane for sure. We'll definitely bring up more here along the way. And again, it's still washing over me here at this point because again, having international competitors in the sport, and international drivers winning in the sport. In fact, and again, I'll transition into this plug here at the same time. That was the subject of my most recent video, which I posted earlier today after the Xfinity race was unfortunately really canceled, basically, just short of the halfway point, giving the win to Cole Custer and the number 00 entry there. Thinking about international drivers in the sport, Trevor Boys, unfortunately, we lost him in February. He was pretty much the first Cup Series driver from Alberta, and ran in the Cup Series through the 1980s. He actually challenged Sterling Marlin for Rookie of the Year in 1983. He drove for James Hilton, so kind of like the Trackhouse deal here, kind of like a team that's certainly known more for NASCAR and American racing rather than an international representation there. A driver that was, again, from a different region of Canada, even than the only Canadian winner to that point, which was Earl Ross back in 1974. Earl was more from the eastern part of Canada, Ontario, I believe, and Trevor Boys there from Alberta. So, certainly didn't anticipate the outcome of this race here at the same time. Actually, I had this video was kind of coming together after Trevor passed in February, and I was going to release it back in the spring. Certainly doing 500 days kind of changed that there, but I'm glad people were able to see it. I'm really pleased with the response so far. Thank you for checking it out. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, it is public on the channel here, on my YouTube channel. So you'll have a chance to see that and learn more about him, as well as see some excellent pictures, particularly that Brian Hallman provided here on this. He had he gave me a tremendous amount of content there to use for that. So it's one it's just great because for Trevor, there was not a whole lot of video footage, not a lot of interviews, very little of it there. I won't spoil some of the footage that's in there if you haven't seen it. But the pictures were tremendously helpful because he did hop between a lot of different teams. And so if you're interested in other international drivers in the sport or other drivers that had their own contributions to the sport there, definitely check that out there because it does mention Project 91 in the video as well. And as I was revising the script closer to this race, that was kind of the subject there on that. So that is the latest one on the channel there. But going back to the Cup Series race here, Shane Van Gisbergen taking the victory there. Justin Haley in second. The margin of victory, 1.259 seconds. In spite of the fact that Haley, I mean, again, that move that Haley pulled, I was stunned. I couldn't believe he got back around him, even for just a moment. I'm thinking of Tony Stewart and Ricky Rudd battling at Sears Point in 05. That was huge. I didn't know Haley had that in him. And track position was, of course, so key at this track, with passing being as challenging as it was, that Haley was able to stay up there. Him and Austin Dillon were up there forever. Austin, unfortunately, caught the wall, as so many drivers did in practice and qualifying. The kiss of death seems to be just winging one of those walls right before the turn. We saw it with Harvick. We saw it with Stenhouse. We saw it with Chase. And then in the race, we saw it with Austin Dillon. It was a tough deal there for him, and unfortunately left Austin with a very disappointing finish, leaving him next to last in the results. His brother Ty Dillon looked like a mechanical issue of some kind. He was kind of pulling on the track about the same time that Truex wrecked in the tire barriers at the end. Stenhouse in his backup car finishes 34th, one lap down after his tangle with Bubba Wallace. Blaney gets back within one lap of the lead after multiple, looks like some wave arounds or lucky dogs that shook him back into the order there. And he completes the bottom five in the 33rd spot. Truex, Bubba Wallace, Harrison Burton, Harvick, and Tyler Reddick. Reddick looked very good at the beginning of this race here. Unfortunately, wasn't able to close the deal again. Had similar bad luck to what he had at Sears Points a few weeks ago, finishing back in the 28th spot there. But looking at the other Trackhouse entries here at the same time, Ross Chastain back in 22nd, and Daniel Suarez in 27th spot there. Suarez further back in the order there with a damaged fender at one point. Josh Bilicki, a good 23rd place finish out there. That's definitely on the higher end there for him and the Live Fast Motorsports team. Jenson Button, I know we've only talked a little bit about him, kind of got overshadowed certainly with how the race played out there. But Jenson was very impressive through the practices this week. Seemed like the two of them were going to be on the front row, probably, if qualifying it played out just a little bit differently. But that's another way to certainly measure the competitiveness of this race in general. We did see a stack up in turn 11 there. We did have one where it was a traffic jam and everybody piled into each other. But I got to say, I think one thing that was very positive from this race, on top of others here, and I know we haven't gone into really the negatives, but I mean, there's definitely things to talk about there, but why front load the show with that? It is how durable this car was. And I know it got pointed out a lot by the broadcast. But again, guys like Noah Gragson and especially Kyle Busch, I thought for how far he was under those tires, I figured he'd probably hit the concrete barrier on the other side. But he actually salvaged a fifth place finish out of this, which I'm sure surprised him just as much as anybody else. But certainly track position's huge. Would 25 laps have changed that? I'm not sure how much. I guess you could still have more accidents and more laps taken up by caution flags and so forth, and who knows how that would have shaken out. I mean, you would have had another pit stop for sure, would have had to kind of shake things up at that point. But still, yeah, I think all things considered, if they do run this race again, 75 laps will probably be fine. Do 55 for the Xfinity race, do 75 for the Cup race. I think that's probably okay. They probably couldn't figure out, they probably anticipated it would probably be a much, longer green flag runs perhaps, or I'm not exactly sure what. I don't know what about the last few races we've had would give them that idea. but maybe that was the situation there. Austin Cindric pinballed his car off the wall in practice, finishes in 6th place. Impressive run for him. Michael McDowell continues to really capitalize on these road course runs in the next-gen car, finishes in 7th. Great job for him. Ty Gibbs in the top 10. Good to see. Chris Buescher, once again, one of the guys I have to really start thinking about on these road courses here. It's not just Sears Point. Although it seems like he really has kind of taken off on that place the last couple of years. 10th place run here. Shouldered Jenson Button out of the way, I believe, on the pit road incident there. Where did Button ultimately get to? He's 21st? Yeah, again, solid performance there out of that, especially with Rick Ware. I know it's a Stewart. I'm sure it was a Stewart-Haas partnership there with the Mobil 1 sponsorship and so forth, but still something to look at there at the same time. But man, just absolutely incredible. Yeah, so let's see. I guess, well, let's see. Where else to really talk about? I guess we can talk about the weekend in general here. So again, I gotta say, I went through so many emotions on this particular race in general because, at the first, it was just kind of glum a little bit because you had the Xfinity race and you had all those Xfinity teams. And I didn't want to come off callous about, NASCAR having to really make this call where the Xfinity race is a couple laps short of the distance and they can't get it in. And it's clear with this rain. I mean, it was ridiculous how much rain was coming in. You see some of the footage. Leland Honeyman posted a tweet of like water coming up through a grate or something like that in some interior building. I don't know where they were when they were filming that. Then the one from Justin Haley's team that showed the amount of water that was on pit road that you could dip the camera underneath it there and see people's feet walking through it. I thought the snow at Fontana was bad, but I mean this was another level here. So I mean certainly the apprehension and wondering, okay, are they even going to get this in? They moved the time up. They're doing the opening ceremonies in the media center. Everybody's just trying to make the best of just kind of a difficult situation. And obviously, nobody can do anything about the weather. I don't think domed racetracks are going to be something that's going to be happening in the near future. Certainly not for a big sprawling road course or street course like this. Ifs and buts, if we could have a race where it's always going to be on, a great, weather that's going to be perfect. But I think, and again, I'll give NASCAR the benefit of the doubt. I know that they scheduled these races so late in the day. I think on Saturday was excusable because they crammed all the Xfinity and Cup practice into then. And I don't think it was that much of a delay before they got the Xfinity race going. On Cup, I'm sure they anticipated that it wasn't going to be raining and they could have the rest of the day open for concerts and everybody to kind of slowly mill their way over to the track. So they would be like an all-day event. I think that was a good intent with this. It's just that when the weather happened, it made it a bad decision. I don't think it was a bad decision to begin with. I think their intents were clear, especially with how many musical acts they had, and unfortunately had to get canceled, and that sucks for the people that were there. But there's nothing for that. I mean, these things happen, and I'll tell you, the people that went to this race, they got the NASCAR experience. They got to see a good race. They got to see plenty of rain delays. They got to see how determined NASCAR was to get the race in with the rain, even keeping the Xfinity teams over when it seemed like there was no way they were going to be able to squeeze in both these races with any chance of heavy rain in the morning. That's the one really thing I do have a problem with, because I know there was talk about Jeremy Clements' team posted the thing about how it costs about the cost of a set of tires to stay another night in the hotels for their team. That's expensive. I mean, especially if they're going to be basically staying in downtown Chicago and walking to the track. That's convenient and that's great. But it's still a difficult situation for these teams, and that's money they're just not going to get back. And they got the whole second half of the season left to go. That's a difficult situation. It would have been nice, as Tommy Joe Martin said, and I agree with him. Absolutely. This decision could have been made on Saturday. It could have been. And it probably wouldn't have been that big a deal because a lot of the people that were leaving the track because of the lightning hold were told by security officials that the race was canceled. That was probably because it was easier to explain that rather than saying it was postponed and then having to answer the next question about when the race is actually going to start. And I don't know if they had that information. They apparently hired 900 private security officials there to the track. How easy was it to communicate that? I don't know, especially with Twitter not working very well over the weekend, which is another problem that they didn't have anything that they could count on. It seemed like everything was just going to be kind of snake bit coming into this. And then they start the race, and you got Denny Hamlin worried about saying look, let's just move he didn't really say, let's move this to Monday, but it's saying, look, you can't do anything about the weather. Let's not do this. Worrying about it just being, I'm sure, a really big mess and just having a lot of wrecks, people tearing up equipment and, kind of ending the week on a sour note and people getting the wrong kind of NASCAR experience. I think David Land was very right to point this out on his show. And he was saying that, you could have a very bad kind of chaos that NASCAR puts on versus the good kind of chaos, the good kind of controlled, exciting racing, which is what we certainly saw, especially in the second half of this race here. I think it was very strong at that point. And then I think from there, going into the first part of the race, when they actually started it, I got to say, at that point, I was just kind of exhausted because this whole week, I mean, how many times, they played that Rick Allen thing where he showed the different sites around Chicago, over and over again, and talking about the track over and over again. And it was just, I was almost, I hate to admit it, given the outcome of this, but I was almost getting a little bit sick of it. It's it felt like we were at this track for 9 days somehow, even though it was just 2. And again, that's certainly not how I feel now after the outcome of this. That was more than a rejuvenating finish to this. And that's why I think it's so important that did happen. It's so great that it did, and that needs to be celebrated for that, for sure. But, that was definitely something that, that I kind of felt like through it. But then, yeah, I mean, I think a turning point was probably when they had that stack up in turn 11. And I guess that was with 20 or 30 laps to go. And you kind of had a little bit of comedy to go there. It's look, that's kind of the NASCAR experience. And really looking at some of the videos on social media, like the one guy that was mugging for the camera, and then Harvick's practice wreck happens behind him, or things like that. It looked like, and it's not often easy to see this on Fox or NBC, but it looked like the crowd was having a hell of a time out there. It looked like everybody was having a great time out there. I loved that shot that Eric Estep got of all the people standing on top of things to see over that wall. Whoever decided to put graphics on that wall so that, you couldn't really just walk by and see the cars there at the time. Whoever's decision was to put that was brilliant, because now you got people, it looked like a picture out of the 20s where you had the circus is in town and everybody's trying to see the tent getting set up. And that was awesome. And it was so terrible that you had, again, the lightning hold, the way they responded to it, that was completely appropriate. I have no issue with that. The safety's got to come first. The last thing they needed was anything awful happening. And it was already bad and mindful of the fact that they did lose a track worker, 53-year-old track worker earlier this week at the beginning of all this, lost his life, apparently was electrocuted from the reports that I had heard. Awful situation. So I'm glad that they took a very preventative stance there to make sure that they didn't have a situation with anybody else in the facility, track worker, fan, or anything else. And hopefully, as everything finishes up tonight and they start taking the track apart, hopefully that'll still stay the same there. I mean, one is already too much. So that's certainly the case there too. But it looked like everybody was having a great time. I loved, and NBC did a really good job. The production of this weekend was fantastic. I gotta say, I have very little notes on that, really. I love the camera work, especially in the beginning of the Xfinity race. Those cameras that were lower on the wall, I'm sure with the rain that screwed that up for today, but you never know it because they still had plenty of other good shots, and you didn't miss a thing of Van Gisbergen's win there at the end. Just a tremendous production job. I thought they did a good job of establishing, the history of the city and talking about that. Again, sometimes they repeated it a little too much, but I think that was certainly, it showed they were excited for this event. I know that was something I talked about on last week's show where I was concerned about is are they going to just treat this like any other race? If anything, I think the talent went a little bit too far in that direction. The production already did a great job with it. The talent didn't really need to lean into that even more. What they needed to do was paint the picture with what was happening with the different drivers in the field. And this is where I think there was an issue on this. I think on a talent standpoint, it was a B minus a little bit. I have to admit, I really do think so. And not just, and I don't want to say, I say this with the condition that they dug deep under very difficult circumstances here. And again, I thought they kept engaged. I thought they kept positive under circumstances that none of them anticipated. I'm sure when this race was announced in, what was it, the summer of last year, that they would never have imagined that just literal monsoon would just sit on the track for the entire day. Like, even to the point where the same storm was flooding Chicagoland Speedway and the site of the former Cicero track too. I mean, there was no way around this. If the race was this weekend, it was just going to get hammered by rain, and that was just unavoidable. But I felt that the way that they tracked things with the drivers this weekend was a bit lacking. Now, part of this was probably because the Xfinity race was cut short, and that really prevented us from getting a lot of stories from the Xfinity race. But I still felt like it was kind of short there, too, because there were a lot of great stories about people who qualified for that Xfinity Series race. We haven't really talked about the Xfinity race yet. There's not much to say, certainly. Justin Marks, your last place finisher with the early engine failure. Andre Castro with a very hard hit into the tire barrier, and then soon after the lightning strike there, and Cole Custer gets the victory. But, you know, there were a lot of drivers that it was very interesting who got into the field and who did not get into the field. I thought it was a very competitive qualifying session. I would have loved to hear much more about these drivers. I was watching a video the other night for an upcoming episode of 500 Days. I was watching the 2001 Spring Homestead race, which was when ESPN took sole possession of just the Truck Series in 2001. And when they did that, almost the entire broadcast was Dr. Jerry Punch and Phil Parsons, same Phil Parsons from the current Truck Series broadcast, just talking about the different drivers in the field and giving you all kinds of interesting little tidbits. They talk about Larry Gunselman, and they talk about Travis Kvapil, and they talked about Ted Musgrave. And by the end of that broadcast, not only do you get a sense of how their day went, but you know exactly like what it took for them to get to the track, who their sponsor is, what their interests are, who their family is. I mean, and this is at a time maybe that, you know, the nucleus was a lot smaller and these people were on like a first name basis with their families. But that's something I wish we could kind of get back to, because really in that qualifying session for the Xfinity race, Andre Castro in particular, getting Jesse Iwuji's team into its first race since Daytona. And apparently the Jesse Iwuji team posted that car was just a shell 10 days before the race. I mean, it's unfortunate that they had the brake failure and they had the wreck. That's terrible. But there was a lot more that was going on there. I mean, they could contextualize that story there. And I definitely put that in the Xfinity article that was just posted earlier today. I think that those were the stories that needed to be said. Brad Perez and another beautiful paint scheme out there. The Bone Steel Aerospace machine there. Unfortunately, didn't get a lot of views of it. Ryan Ellis out there. I mean, a lot of these other competitors that made the field. Preston Pardus in the throwback paint scheme to his father's Midwest Transit car from 1999. I'm glad we got to see that car at least a few times with a 13th place run that he had. Great performance out there. Second run that team's ever even had. These were things that need to be built up through the broadcast, and I just don't feel like they were. A lot of these drivers weren't even mentioned until they showed the starting grid well after qualifying was over with. And this extended even to Shane Van Gisbergen. I mean, you had the situation with him where you could see in practice, suddenly he's fifth, and then he's leading the session, and then he's in qualifying, and he's jumping back in to get into round two. And like they're still kind of, they always felt like a step or two behind, and that continued into this race. And they, certainly from them not only having a hard time saying, his name, but it seemed like they had a clear threshold about how much they could even say about him and his background. I mean, they couldn't even, it seemed like they were even getting confused about if he was Australian or from New Zealand. And that's something you just can't screw up. Like, you got to get that right. I mean, people from one and the other don't like to be confused with one or the other. That's just what it is. And that's so important, especially if you're going to be talking about international competitors in racing. You got to get the nationality right, man. It's all those little things there too. So I wish there was more of that, because I think that would have carried over better amidst, all that. I felt like, and again, it sounds silly to criticize them for this, but I think they got a little bit too wrapped up in just, oh my God, we're in Chicago, we're in downtown Chicago, isn't this crazy? It felt like they just kind of kept saying that over and over again. It's like, oh my God, look at that, there's that building. Oh my God, there's that statue. Oh, there's this, there's that. It's like, okay, that's cool. You can do that at the start. You can do that when you're kind of leading into it, but you better add on the story of it being a race too. We talked last week about the 94 Brickyard 400 or the 79 Daytona 500. And, any of those, it would have been like if the 94 Brickyard was just constantly talking about, oh, let's talk about Indy 500 history. It's like, think of all the great winners here. Ray Haroon. Let's talk about AJ Foyt. Let's talk about this and that. And like, you can do that, but there's a race going on at the same time. And so what you should do is the best of the best can juxtapose those two things. And they can make it feel like you don't even notice it. Like they'll say like, this person's, it's like, this is Chicago, home of the Willis Tower. And here's Brent Sherman, who was born just 20 miles from here. And he hasn't made a start in 5 years. I don't think they even said his name one time in that broadcast. And yeah, he was running at the back of the field, but there were people on social media that were asking, it's like, wait a minute, he was in the show? I didn't even know. It's like, that's the thing. There's either, and it doesn't even have to be a driver that's at the back of the field. It could be somebody, further up. A lot of the guys, again, Preston Pardus's car and the story behind it barely got a mention. And I hate that for them because I think what they're doing on that team and trying to develop a program, and Preston's still trying to break through, run against his Spec Miata friends there, like Brad and all that, is definitely another thing to really look at too. So, that was the thing I thought was really lacking, and it really needed that. And I know they were vamping because they had to because of the rain. I always talk about on this show that I really am not a big fan of rain delay coverage. I usually don't watch it. So if people ask me about, like, what do you think about this thing that happened in a rain delay, I'll be like, unless the clip shows up and they mention it, I think it's boring. And I've covered races during rain delays, like Darlington or Fontana. I have a hard time finding coverage and stuff I try to make it interesting if I can. With just the stuff I do on social media or the YouTube channel. But it's hard. It's hard. And I don't envy them for trying to do it as best they can. But I think whether it's good or bad, I didn't really like watching it back in the old ESPN days. I didn't particularly care. And before social media, it was a real challenge. You had to kind of keep it on, because there was no other way of knowing when the race was going to start. You had to kind of count on them to kind of keep you in the loop. Thankfully today you really don't, so it's more disposable, I think, now than ever. That's probably the best way to put it, really. But but I think I really would have liked more on the drivers, because when you have a special event like this, you're going to bring a lot of different people into the mix. And even with the limits of the charter system, even with just having Xfinity and Cup, which, by the way, was a great decision, too. I'm glad they had both series here. I hated that Xfinity didn't really get their chance to kind of really show themselves. I think that race was setting up to be a real barn burner to the end of that. I don't think Cole Custer would have won that thing. And if he did, I don't think it would have been as easy as he made it look at the beginning. I thought John Hunter was looking very strong, and I would have loved to see the guys that were pitting just before that caution and just before that red flag, guys coming back up there, guys like Sage Karam, who had that flat tire at the beginning. I would have loved to see how Brad or Preston or Kyle Weatherman, a lot of those guys would have done, whether it was rain or dry or anything. I think they would have put on a fantastic show, at least as good as what we saw here. I expected the Cup race to be the weaker of the two this weekend, really, because I thought these cars weren't going to be able to throw themselves around the corners here. Proved me wrong. They were absolutely doing that out there. There were a lot of shots from the walls that, thankfully, they just held the shot and didn't do that trick shot thing where you could see them just skating on the edge of control. And that was really exciting. That was wonderfully done. Again, production, 10 out of 10. Fantastic on this. And that's saying under time that I'm sure a lot of their stuff was shorting out in the rain. Again, NBC's production, great job. I just wish the talent and the organization was geared a little bit better. That's why I posted that message about what I think the best NBC lineup would be. And I still stand by this, too. I got a lot of interesting feedback on it, so I appreciate the discussion on this. But it occurred to me, the problem I have with Rick Allen is Chris Myers. He's the same person. Chris Myers is a good host. He's like Adam Alexander that way. He's a good host. It's why Adam is a good job on NASCAR Race Hub. You know, he's good at like, you know, schmoozing with these people and kind of being a little playful and lighthearted. Same thing with Chris Myers. He takes himself a little seriously, and it's kind of fun seeing him kind of bounce off people that way. But he's got a good host because he's got a good voice. He can kind of, you know, be in that position. So that's where I think he needs to be. I think he would be so much better as the guy in the, you know, the Peacock pit box, the equivalent of the Hollywood Hotel, or, you know, or the NBC pit box from even further back with Bill Weber. I think that kind of role would be great because he's got that kind of presence. And the problem with, and the reason there's a difference between being a host and a really good play-by-play guy. It's not the same thing. Very few are able to really do both. Probably Ken Squire was probably the closest to it. And even then, I know there's people that don't like Ken Squire or weren't a big fan of his calls, because I think he does kind of trend to that host segment. He's really good at introducing things. He's good at kind of organizing like a more celebrity kind of pushed aspect, or maybe kind of a production where you're just kind of shooting the breeze with people, like, you know, that kind of thing. But you're the, you know, you're kind of the serious, you're kind of the straight man, you're kind of the person in that role there. That's very different from a guy like Alan Bestwick, like Bob Jenkins, like Eli Gold even. You know, guys that are able to, they're able to step up the excitement. They're not that stiff. They're a little bit more flexible, and they can get excited when exciting stuff happens, and they can get serious when serious stuff happens. They're a little bit more dynamic. A host doesn't have to be that way, because a host is all about the show. It's all about putting on, like, oh, I'm putting on this presentation, and it's like, you know, you're the kind of person that's like, you know, presenting somebody with an award or something like that, and you're good at that. That's a different set of skills, though, from describing action and staying with it and not falling behind it. I criticize Adam Alexander for doing that, and I think Rick Allen still does that. I think he comes off, even when it was just him and Steve Letarte, it felt like he was a third wheel somehow, and I don't know how he accomplishes that. But I think that's because, again, he would be fantastic at doing hosted segments, doing something that's, again, a bit more formal, a bit less on the button that you have to kind of shift gears really quickly, and almost like a guy that has much more of a radio background. And I'm sure he has some background in that as well. But I mean, some of them have really kind of kept that with him. And again, Alan Bestwick, I think, is one of the best that's done it. I know he's doing the SRX series. I don't know if there's any potential of him getting back into NASCAR, but if there is, I think the best booth would be him, Brad Daugherty, and Dale Jr. Let's face facts, folks. You're not going to be able to dynamite Dale Jr. out of that booth. As Mike Joy said, you know, any concerns that Jr. has about like job security or anything like that, it's farcical. And that's not a bad thing, because he serves a very important role. He's got a great historical knowledge of the sport. He's hosted this podcast for as long as he has, and he does a good job with that. And again, different kind of hosting there. And we're not talking about play-by-play. We're talking about like color analysts and so forth. But he kind of has that kind of, it reminds me almost kind of a Ned Jarrett aspect of it. He has a more, which is kind of strange to accuse Junior of, because of course he of the famous slide job call. But again, I think that his normal speaking voice, not on the radio style broadcast where everybody has to shout over everything. I think he's good at providing that context and how you drive the cars and the little nuances of it. I like that. And I like Brad Daugherty because I think he's still the closest thing we have to Benny Parsons. I've said it many times. I'll say it again. And I'm dead serious about it. I think I always loved his broadcasts in ESPN. And how excited he would get. I loved he would talk about the food in the area. That was definitely a big feature from this weekend. I know they brought him out much more for the basketball context with Michael Jordan and all that, and that's cool. But I loved him this weekend. I wanted to hear more of him. I would have loved to hear him in the booth. When you had him, there's a clip of him from the Xfinity race at Texas a couple years ago, and he was great. And I just think you need to have the right people for him to play off of. But keep it a 3-man booth. I think 4 people is still too much. And I'm still not a big fan of Jeff Burton and Steve Letarte in the booth. I think Steve's insight is really good. Steve's kind of the X factor in all this. It almost seems like you can put him anywhere. I still think he'd be best on pit road because he's a crew chief. And I think he's different from Larry McReynolds in that sense. Larry McReynolds is the way he explained things is much more hands-on, and his and again, the much more old school aspect. I think that's why he was able to work in the booth so much better. Steve's not bad in the booth, but I think he would be so good on pit road or like a garage reporter, or just describing what's happening. We're seeing little things that teams are doing, kind of going from team to team and seeing what they do. I mean, I'm sure back when he was working for Hendrick, they were trying to always figure out what different teams were doing, and maybe, the problem is that maybe the booth is the only way he could really do that. Maybe it would be too difficult to do it from the middle of it. But the thing with Steve is he's got such a loud voice. It's almost too much in the booth. Like, I think it'd be great on pit road. You wouldn't need anybody to, you hear this about the late Mike Demers that was JD McDuffie's crew chief. It's like, you're not going to need a microphone because everybody's going to be able to hear you. I think Steve is definitely the perfect example of that, I think, of the current broadcasters this time here. So I think he'd be great there. And then, you have Rick as be a host of with the Peacock Pit Box, and have Jeff Burton be in that kind of role, with kind of in the same mix with Dale Jarrett or Kyle Petty or these others, and kind of do that. Again, Jeff Burton, I think he's, I don't know. It doesn't quite work for me with him, because the problem with Jeff is he sounds too much like everybody in the booth. He sounds like Junior. He sounds like Steve. So I think separating them to different roles will allow them to have their own voices there. And see, this is a solution that I don't think is anything that's too mean or anything. It's not getting rid of any of them. I think it's just a matter of putting people in the right places. Again, the biggest concern I always have with modern broadcasting is waste. And sometimes, you just don't have, waste means you have what you need. You're just not using it to its fullest potential. You're not putting it in the right places. You're not you have the money to spend on things that'll make this better, but you're spending it on other silly stuff. I like that Rutledge Wood has been scaled back on this. That's good. They need to kind of just try something different there. Rutledge has got his own deal with the Hot Wheels show, and that's cool. Great. But NBC, I'm glad they're trying different things to kind of work different things out there. And I know that they've shown more eagerness to do this than Fox. I know that Fox usually has guest commentators on there, but it's much more restricted, which I don't know why. Fox used to be the cool kid on the school back in the early 2000s. I don't know how NBC got to outflank them here as the ones really pushing the boundaries here, but they absolutely have. But I think that's something else that they should really kind of look at. So I don't know if that'll happen. I'm sure they're not watching this. But it doesn't hurt to put it out there, and that's kind of where I stand on that. Not to turn this all into a broadcast chat again, because I'm sure I do that plenty enough times here too. But let's see here. I guess we can talk a little bit about the Xfinity race here. Not too much more to add from the discussion of what happened there with the race getting shortened. Again, I hate it for the teams out there. Not just the fact that nobody was really able to really stretch their legs and make a challenge to climb through the field. A lot of the people at the back of the field were at the back of the field at the start. Some that fell to the back never got a chance to come back up. Connor Mosack was losing ground there, driving for Joe Gibbs, which is not going to reflect well on paper. And that's unfortunate, because I don't know how many more opportunities he's going to have in that car after, really getting some good runs with Sam Hunt Racing like he had at Portland. Hopefully things turn around there for him. But that's another way to certainly look at that. Looking at the Xfinity Series results here and pulling that up. I didn't see Racing Reference, still hasn't updated that yet. But again, top 10 for that. Cole Custer, your winner. John Hunter Nemechek, second. Allgaier, third. Brett Moffitt, fourth. Austin Hill in fifth. Sammy Smith in sixth. Daniel Hemrick, seventh. Eighth place for Chandler Smith. Parker Kligerman, ninth place spot. And Kaz Gralla from 25th on the grid to finishing in the top 10. Then being awarded stage 2 points, even though the race stopped 2 laps short of stage 2. Again, I think, I still stand by what I said earlier there, that was the only decision they had to make, basically, at that point. When it got to be that they were having an absolute monsoon out there, that they had a little bit of a window to get this race in, and then we're getting to within about 1 or 2 hours of the scheduled start of the Cup race, they had to pull the plug. But the problem is, how they went about it. And I think, certainly with this amount of rain, and the way the weather looked on Friday evening, when people were kind of like really trying to, kind of circulate, really the way the weather deteriorated all through Saturday. I guess not so much Friday. Friday seemed like it was okay. Saturday, it was definitely coming in and you had issues with cloud cover and lightning and so forth, you had to know that it's not going to rain itself out overnight. I think the severity of the storm and the fact that it didn't move on, like we see so many of these fronts that blow through, like a place like Kentucky or Kansas or something like that. The fact that this one didn't, I think that definitely caught them off guard, and then you definitely had a problem there. But they had to know it was at least, if there was going to be any chance of significant rain, and I'm sure they knew this the night before, they should have just pulled the plug. They should have just said, look, on second thought, this is it. This is the race. Maybe do victory lane ceremonies the next morning before the cup race, have that be kind of a lead in there. So, but, don't have the team stay out there. I mean, it's already such a burden out there for these guys. They're the ones that work to a much tighter margin. There's so much less in the purse. And yeah, an extra night in the hotel, to some people, maybe it's not a big deal, but to them is massive because you got your crew, you got your driver, you got everybody else, you got food, you got all this other stuff in downtown Chicago. I'm sure there's no doubt there's places that these, they're maybe more affordable, but it's not that kind of venue. And whatever the venue is, if this happened at Pocono, same deal. It should have been handled the same way. So that's unfortunate. I think once it got to be Sunday morning and it was raining that heavily, they had to pull the plug. But yeah, I agree. They should have done it earlier. And I know hindsight's 2020. It's easy to say that now, but still doesn't hurt to say it because this is not going to be a situation that maybe is going to be unusual. Especially since, I know that there were contingencies available for them to run the race on Monday. I think that would have been a burden too, to stretch this another day, because now you're having them pay for 2 extra nights. I don't think realistically that was going to happen. I think they would have been nice. I think for those of us, as race fans, we would have loved to see the rest of that race. Especially sounds like, tomorrow is actually going to be pretty decent weather in Chicago. It certainly lightened up towards the end of this race. But I don't think that was practically going to happen, especially since these teams got to pack up and get ready for Atlanta with a completely different car. Most of these teams likely with completely different drivers, and they're in a completely different venue. So they got to go from Chicago to Charlotte to Atlanta. That's a lot to do in very short order. So I think it was going to be make it or break it on Saturday, and that was it. And, and as much as I'm sure they worked out a deal with local politicians to get the race in on Monday, who knows if they would have really kind of supported that. I know there's been a regime change there with the current mayor. I don't know. I don't know how well that would have worked out. Thankfully, we don't have to know that. The only question remaining is are they going to run this race again? And I think that's another thing that, is definitely going to be talked about the rest of this week and the rest of the time until we hear about what the schedule is next season, as that still comes together. We haven't really heard. I assume they're going to do the Clash again at the Coliseum if it was a 3-year deal, although they made an announcement about it at Sears Point last year and they didn't do that this year, so I don't know. But with this venue here, I think certainly if they had a chance to run it during the day, to do the concerts and be able to have the full experience for everybody out there, I think it's worth doing at least one more time. I think, as to the money involved or the resources, that's for NASCAR to figure out. If they're willing to do it, if the receipts are what they are, and it still looked like they had a really good turnout in spite of everything that happened there. I'm sure they'd be willing to try it again. I think hopefully we get even more open teams or even more international drivers competing in it there. I think that would be fantastic. If we get 40 plus Cup teams out there, can you imagine? We could actually have a qualifying session of consequence in the Cup Series. I mean, it's been so long since we had that this year, with just the 2 DNQs back at the Daytona 500. So, this could be a marquee event, potentially. It takes a lot of effort. As to the potential of other venues, I don't know. I like the connection that they made, and they did drill this in, but rightfully so, that Chicago has that connection to motor racing in general. The old the race to, what was it, to Evanston that they did back in the 1890s. That's fantastic. So now you got a literal street race in the park around the Married with Children fountain. And it's thoroughly exciting. So that's good to see. So I hope it does come back. Haven't ruled out covering it myself, to be perfectly honest. I've never been to Chicago, so I don't know. We're still kind of figuring out our schedule for next year. For those of you who follow our trackside coverage, my next planned trackside race isn't going to be until the finale at Phoenix, although we haven't ruled out possibly adding either Kansas in September or Vegas in October. I love covering Vegas in particular. I think that track's very accessible, and I enjoy going down there. But we'll see how things shake out there. But really, looking at the Xfinity results there, we talked about Andre Castro. I talked about this a little bit earlier there. The next last place finished there, unfortunately, but did qualify Jesse Iwuji's injury. I was doing my entry list article on Thursday for this race, or Wednesday night, I guess it was, and I was looking him up on Twitter, and then I found out he was following me already, and I thought that was so cool. I was like, and we actually had a good conversation. He said he liked the videos on the channel, and that was really cool. So got to wish him good luck on that, and I'm glad he qualified for the event too. And he didn't finish in last place, so I didn't have to do that either. So that was good. Certainly glad he's okay that he hopped out of the car there. But again, another story I would have wished that we got more of during the weekend there. Again, I know there was a lot that was going on there. Looking at other drivers that had good runs, I don't think we can talk about Alex Gwinnett. Hadn't seen him in a few years. I believe he ran the Truck Series race at Mosport a few years ago. Hadn't done Xfinity since he drove for Victor Obaika years ago. He gets out there and finishes in 15th. I mean, that's fantastic for them, especially since the 36 car that DGM injured there doesn't really run the full season. So I thought that was a fine showing out of him. Spencer Pumpelly, I thought he was really impressive in practice. Even though after he backed into the wall there, he still had a fast run in practice. Did a solid job in qualifying, made sure he got the show, even when his teammate Joey Gase missed the show in the 0-8. Unfortunately, he only has a 28th place finish there, but I thought I would have loved to see what he could do in that car. I think he really had a chance to turn things around. So I hope that they do this again, and I especially hope that they bring the Xfinity Series back out, because honestly, I mean, really, we didn't get a chance to really see them race. We saw the very beginnings of what was going to be another excellent road course race for the Xfinity Series. We just didn't really get to see it. Would Custer have still been a factor in the finish? Probably, but who knows? We didn't see that out of Denny Hamlin in the Cup race, and that's a less competitive package as it seems right now. So we'll find out. But that's another one to kind of look at going forward here. I have to say, I'm so infuriated about what they've done with Twitter this weekend. I know it's a little bit of an off topic here, but I got to say, with Twitter could not have. I know that in the grand scheme of things, and the importance of different social media platforms and what people use them for, personally or professionally, covering a race is not really the most important thing, the most compelling reason on the face of the earth. But I gotta say, if for NASCAR's standpoint here, for there to be this issue with it this weekend for a highly anticipated race, and then for people to be like locked out of it, I mean, it's just absurd. And then I don't know for you guys, but for me, I couldn't get it to work at all on the last couple laps. It kept saying my posts were spam, and I'm like, I'm just posting updates. I post these posts are really close together because stuff is happening close together. So something's going sideways there. I don't want to go too far down the road on that because I know everybody on YouTube is going to be talking about it, and there's already plenty of articles about it. But just add me to the list of people who are not happy about it. So something's got to work on that. Yeah, Ben, I know you're not happy about it either. So yeah, it's awful. I mean, Twitter's already a bad enough website already. To have it be bad in terms of at least it functions. If it doesn't function, oh God, we're going down the road anyway. Then you got a real problem here. So I don't know. Yeah, it's pretty bad. But again, that's more of a petty. It feels like a petty concern in comparison here. With everything else. But I would have loved to be able to post this. I had to post it just in the YouTube comments instead. But a lot of great history with this too. So huge. Wow, we still got 126 in here. Thank you so much everyone for tuning in. Definitely Shane is the man of the hour here on the show. Talked a lot about him at the beginning here. We'll do some trivia here in a little bit. I got something for show and tell here for tonight. I did pick up the $5 Cole Custer shirt, and I had to bring this out here. It was actually marked down twice. When it came in the mail, it had a tag on it that showed it was marked down, I think from $25 to $13, and then $5 on the site here. So this is actually from his win at Kentucky in the Cup Series there in 2020. So I definitely want to bring that out here for that. But yeah, so that was kind of the deal here at the same time. Let's see here. But oh gosh, let me jump into the. Oh, I didn't even see the super chats. Thank you so much. We got a few here. Let me jump into these. Thank you so much here, folks. Let me jump into these, and then we'll have any other discussions on this too, and any other questions you guys have. I'll kind of browse the chat here because I'm sure I missed plenty on that too. But any other topics you want to talk about here on the show this evening? First one here from Beast of Metal. I welcome this chaos. The chaos on the track, the chaos, the ultimate upset, and the chaos of the number one agreeing on how to pronounce Van Gisbergen. Just keep it out of the inspection station and we're good. Yeah, I guess that's the other thing we got to wait for here. All of this, of course, pending the results of post-race inspection. Your last place runner being Alex Bowman and Van Gisbergen being your victor. I think adding that E makes it a little bit easier to say. I'm trying to think of like, what was the other? Oh, De Benedetto. I think if you went Di Benedetto, it was easier to say his last name there. I remember being on a podcast years ago that struggled with that back when he was a development driver. Oh, yeah. And, of course, Twitter's not working, so I have no clue if inspection's clear. If anybody else hears about it, definitely mention it in the chat. We can kind of jump at that, too. Let's see here. Yeah, just keep out of the inspection station. We're good. So, yeah, again, thank you. Thank you, Beast Metal. I like it with the 91 cents. That's good. But yeah, I mean, huge. I love the chaos, too. But it wasn't too chaotic. I was very struck by the fact and then Gisbergen came out of the car, and one of the first things he said was how respectful the drivers were. I'm sure after what we saw at COTA and what we heard from Kimi Räikkönen, and especially Jenson Button, and Jordan Taylor, also, not to overlook him, other drivers that just really kind of had an issue with how these drivers were racing each other and how much of a mess it actually was. And I think really that was probably because everybody was on the same level, that everybody was kind of trying to figure this track out. And they're just trying not to do something stupid, because if you just winged one of those walls, you were going to go straight into the next one, and that was the end of your day. It was amazing that people like Ryan Blaney could get back out there, given how much damage they got to their cars. So that was definitely another one to kind of look at the same time. But yes, I agree, Beast of Metal, for sure. TCB for life. Thank you for your super chat as well. Love the 2001 series you did. Enjoyed the Trevor Boys video I seen today. Much love, Brock. Enjoy your stuff. Need a mod? I got you, bud. Okay, right on. I appreciate it. I deputized a couple here, but we may add some more here if it comes to be. We usually have a pretty small group in here, so it's usually not that necessary. But when we have a big race like this with big moments, yeah, things jump up a little bit, and this has definitely been one of those. But thank you so much for tuning in, TCB, and I appreciate that for sure. 2001 series I'm still working on. That's why I watched the Homestead race yesterday. And I'm getting some good work done on that. I'm also getting some work done on the next episode of Rise of the Field Fillers. I've begun working on the script of that this last week here. So I want to kind of get that going. So I'd love to get both those scripts done about the same time, record both of them, and then just start focusing on the editing. That would be a lot of fun. And then whichever one of them gets done first is going to be the next release. I'm also looking at some potential for some other individual videos here at the same time. But I'm trying not to take on too much at the same time, because I'm also trying to get the Derek Cope book finished, and we're still inching towards the finish line on that one. But I do appreciate it. We got much more content coming up here, and the Trevor Boys video is just the first one that I definitely wanted to kind of finish up from this year's slate, or at least this spring's slate here going into the summer. Bowser Jr. XD, thank you for your super chat as well. With a margin of 1.259 seconds, this race had the largest margin of victory in the history of the Chicago streets, but you probably already knew that. Yes, certainly for the inaugural event. But thank you for bringing that up there for sure. Interesting. And you bring that up there too. I know we talked about James Davison and running the sim race here years ago, and how big of a margin of victory he had in that one there. I mean, I think we were thinking about wondering if that was going to be a potential. Certainly if you have a green-white checker, that kind of negates that. But still, with Haley's effort there, being able to kind of stay in there and stay a factor in the finish of this was good to see. But thank you for the statistic on that as well. Nicholas Gray, thank you for your super chat. Is SVG All-Star eligible for this win? I was talking about that with Lastbro. It's a good question. I would say he would be. I think as a winner, depending what the requirements are. I mean, if you're a race winner in the Cup Series, It shouldn't matter if you're an open guy or not. You should be able to get a ride. The question is where you get a ride for it. I would think Trackhouse would find a way to put them in their 91 car for that event, knowing that you're traditionally not going to have, at least from what the program has been so far, usually not going to have the number 91 out there for anything other than a road course race. But you think about Boris Said back when he won the pole at Sears Point. MB2 gave him a ride in the 01 car for the Busch Clash that year. I think it was just an 04. It's either in the 01 or the 10 car there or something like that. But they tend to make that work. That's more for poles versus wins. But with wins, I think that should be weighted even more. He absolutely should be in the All-Star race next year, which would be great, especially if it's still at Wilkesboro. Think about that, trying to do something very different there. Hopefully we have a more competitive race at Wilkesboro, but I think I still think, regardless of how that track raced, it was mission accomplished for just getting that track back from the dead and better than before. I absolutely, much like this one, I mean, I hated missing this one in person, even with the terrible weather and everything, but I hated missing Wilkesboro even more, because that looked like that was a really special event, and it's huge how that all came together. But that's definitely another part of that too. But I would think he would be. I really think he would. I think it'd be a hard argument against it. It's whether or not he gets the ride, or if they feel like entering him in the race. That's going to be kind of the issue. So that would be another one to do. They make the track their house. Yeah, exactly. There you go. But this is huge. I mean, it's so thrilling. Again, it's still settling in here of just what was accomplished here, and I'm sure the more articles are already being written right now to kind of get that context to that and understand that story and yeah, gosh, 91. It just occurred to me. I mean, really, 91's had more last place finishes in recent years. I remember when it was the second car that Humphrey Smith entered, and Mike Bliss and Reed Sorensen were finishing last in it. I think 2012 for a time there, and I guess it hasn't really even run in Cup that much since then. I don't know what its most recent start was. I remember Mark Goossens running it at Sears Point in 2007. He got that wreck with Kyle Petty at the very beginning there, with the WTF wreck that you see memed all the time there. That was back when it was Randy Humphrey always ran that number for his Busch and Cup teams, or his Nationwide and Cup teams back then. A number that doesn't get a lot of notice for sure. Kind of an unusual one there, but definitely understand the significance of it with the combination of kind of the 99 and the 1 teams and so forth. But yeah, I think that's really cool. That's really cool. I'm excited to see. I'm excited to see where this goes. Do I think he's going to get a full-time ride? I don't think that's going to be the case because, again, the charter system just doesn't allow for it. And I think I think it's going to draw more focus on the flaws of the charter system. Because, again, something like this should be more common. You should have opportunities for people to have open teams that are able to compete, whether they're affiliated with a charter team or not. I think that should be important. I think that should be maintained. And maybe that's the reason that NASCAR has been reluctant to make the charter system mandatory, acknowledging these flaws. But as to if that's going to get fixed or if it's too late, I don't know. We talked about that many times on this show, and I'm not sure exactly how that's going to turn out. But that would be another one to kind of look at the same time. But so happy for him. So happy for him. I mean, this is huge. And I think NBC, in spite of the fact that their weakness, I do feel, was talking about a lot of the drivers in the field. See, I do think that they rose to the occasion when they needed to at the end, even as much as they were tripping over the name and having trouble, just saying SVG over and over at the end. Good thing they didn't have Cyril van der Merwe or Giacomo Giacomo or other names from even the late 80s, early 90s have a harder time with those. But there's other ones you could definitely talk about. I remember when Matthias Ekstrom came in at Sears Point a few years ago. Lots of interesting different cultures, different names, different backgrounds, which is cool. And again, I like, and again, the great thing with racing, just I guess just sports in general at the more thematic element. It's a show me what you got thing. I mean, you can have any background out there. You just go out there and you just show it. It's not there's no diversity for diversity's sake. It's like, nothing else is any different for you. You got to go out there, you got to perform. And if you do and you succeed, I mean, my God, I mean, that's huge for you. That's huge for, for everything. And that can have massive results. And I think that's really a tremendous thing from this too. So, yeah. And again, we've had these discussions before with Bubba Wallace's win and Daniel Suarez and other, not Bubba Wallace, of course, not being international, but I mean, distinctive for reasons that are obvious, it's, other things that happen in the context of all that. So, that's, it's huge. It's huge. I'm just tickled right now. I'm still trying to think of other ways to describe it, but it's wonderful. And this is something that I hope is a sign of more things to come in Cup Series particularly, because it's something that can light a fire under a lot of these competitors and really try to figure out, it's like, wow, how is that guy so fast? How is that New Zealander guy so fast? So that would be great. So we'll see. We will see. So let's see. We'll do some trivia here in a little bit. I do have the show and tell here for you, just a little thing on that. And we'll jump into that here at the same time. So let's go ahead and do that now. Gosh, we got some people in here. And I'll kind of browse the chat here too if there's anything else that I missed here on that. SVG isn't a fan of ovals. Well, he'll have a good discussion on that. You never know. You always want, again, it goes both ways. You got drivers working out of their element too. If it's about trying to get them on the ovals, that's the thing. That's where I think the full-time season shouldn't be the goal. I'm a little concerned with that because that's almost described as like making it these days. It's like, well, okay, what was this then? Here's a guy that did a one-off start, and he beat all comers. I think that's damned impressive. I think that's extremely impressive. His first ever start. It is so rare in so many ways. It's stunning. I mean, I'm stunned. Yeah. I mean, my goodness. I think it's just like, it reminds me so much of the Hail Melon last year. I'm just stunned, so there you go. Well, for those of you who do, I'm sure we got a lot of newer people here with the people in the chat here, but we'll do a little trivia on this. I bring this old late 90s Trivial Pursuit NASCAR Tiger Electronics deal here and read off some questions just for fun. Here's some Q&A. There are some categories on this. There are 6 of them. And then whichever category you'd like, just mention it in the chat. Whichever one gets the most votes, we'll do some questions from that. And that's usually what we kind of do to kind of wind the show up here. I also have some show and tell here for something on here. And any other questions you guys have from the weekend, we'll kind of run that by and we'll do that. So first, the categories again are NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. Once again, the categories are NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. Those are the categories, so definitely go ahead and mention in the chat which of those you'd like. One thing, it's off camera here, but I'll mention it here. I do have a setup I'm working on with a second screen, which should hopefully allow to show, pictures or video or, things on social media a little better. With the interest of tonight's show, I didn't set it up for tonight because I figured we'd have plenty to talk about. Wouldn't have to really do anything like that this evening. But probably for Atlanta next week, I'll have the second screen set up, and we'll be able to kind of do a more visual interface on that. I'll try to remember that next week, but we'll get that set up there. But I did finally get the cords in. I want to give a special shout-out to our local post office person, Justin, who delivered this today. I did not expect him to deliver it on Sunday, but the cables I needed to hook this thing up. So kudos to him. I hope he's having a great 4th of July. I hope you all are having a great 4th of July weekend for that matter. But I really appreciated that because we can get this set up and have some fun with that here on the show here as well. For show and tell, as you guys have your categories here, I wanted to show this bad boy. We talk about the field fillers. I did pick up one of these right here. This right here, folks. The 2004 Joe Ruttman Dodge Intrepid. The actual Mikosuke diecast 124 scale here. These, and again, I'm sorry, I'm trying to remember the user that sent me the note. It's on Twitter, so I'm not going to be able to pull it up. but I really do appreciate the person that gave me a heads up on this on social media that they had some of these. Were still in Homestead, Florida, the area of the Miccosukee Resort, the Miccosukee tribe down there, and they were apparently throwing away boxes of these 24th scale and 64th scale versions of the famous Start Park Dodge Intrepid. No name on the roof, just like when Joe Ruttman was driving it. Really crazy situation there. I mean, this was, I couldn't believe they actually made this, but a beautiful box they put it in here. Kind of interesting. It doesn't have the Nextel Cup logo on the side of it, but on the front, it is actually the 2004 Dodge. I'll open it here. You can kind of get a better view of it. Let's see here. There we go. Yeah, one of these days, I'm going to have to find a good place for this here at Lascar headquarters. But yeah, let's take her out. It's a special night. There we go. There we go. Look at that. See, there is a 2004 Intrepid. You can't sneak a Joe Ruttman diecast by me. That is, I'm sure they meant it to be Johnny Benson, who did more of the fully sponsored efforts, but that is a 2004 Intrepid nose with the, I guess the Dodge Stratus headlights there. One of my favorite models of the cars there. It's just a gorgeous, gorgeous reproduction of it here with the detail. But again, as you'll see, yeah, no Nextel Cup logos on the side of that there. But that was, it was introduced late in 2003, but that would be with a different Dodge nose. So that would be very different from this. But very cool. I think there are still a couple on eBay. If you look up the Miccosukee one, again, I'll have to find the listing there to see where that is. But there are, I believe they had some. It was a little on the pricey side there, but when I saw that, I was like, oh yeah, no, we're going to have to pull the trigger on that one for sure. Let's see. Is it on there? They have some. I think this was the listing. Yes. Yes, there are still 8 available. So I will copy this in here. So if you guys are interested, let me put up the link on this because I don't want to just tease that. Oop, you don't need to get some reverb for me. Oop, that's kind of a long link. Let's just kind of drop that in there. Oop, or is it going to let me post it? Hopefully. Oh, it's probably too long. Hang on. Let me trim it down. Let me see if it works if I just trim that down. Can I get rid of all this? Does that still work? Okay, that still works. Good. There we go. Hopefully it lets me post this. There we go. Will be more races for the 91 for, by the way. Yeah, absolutely. But yes, it was this lister, Tempest 786. He's the eBay user that listed this. Another person on Twitter, I try to remember if it was DNF Racers or somebody there was giving me a heads up on this. But there are a few others here. But this particular person was actually the one that actually rescued these. He had some 64th scale ones, but those disappeared like almost instantly. But the 24th scale ones, if you are interested in that, yes, that is on there. Okay, yeah, that link works. Good. So yeah, so that'll be another one there to check out. But yeah, if you're interested in that, that would be another one to look at there for you. Coming to Hooters tomorrow, we have free fried pickles. There you go. I like that. So yeah, no, yeah, it really turned out nice, and we're gonna find a good place for it. I have a 2009 custom Dave Blaney that I think I featured on the show back when we had the old studio. I've shown on that, but that was on there. 64th there too? I haven't seen that one. Yeah, the Brad's 2009. I saw that one was there. Inspection still ongoing? Okay, probably was going to go pretty long here too. Alrighty. But yeah, that's for show and tell tonight. So I got that, and definitely wanted to kind of share that on the show here along the way. So definitely still a field filler presence here on the show here. So let's see. I saw a lot for drivers earlier. What is the which is the top category here? Let's see. Extra fat, the 80th closest road course finish. Yeah, very interesting, Bowser Jr. Thank you on that. Let's see. What am I doing for the 4th? Yep. Let's see. Pretty much just kind of taking it easy out here. Probably, let's see. Well, I mean, it's a little bit tricky. Actually, the last bro is going to be going on a coast to coast trip. My father's got a case he's got to do on the other side of the country, and he didn't want to fly, so they're going to drive over there. So that's kind of going to be more our preparations here this 4th of July weekend. Actually, this long weekend is kind of coming handy on that. We'll probably go see a movie or something this weekend. I saw the Indiana Jones movie. That was not very good, but I guess there was that. But that'll pretty much be it. We don't really do fireworks out here. California is very hinky about that, and understandably, given the Caldor fire a couple of years ago was really bad, and so that's not really going to be so much the activity out here. I've seen that meme already with that big the fireworks that go off and behind the person's van and stuff on YouTube, and I'm sure if you haven't seen it, you probably will these next couple of days here. But yeah, that's not so much it out here. I don't know if they do parades or something out here. We got to look. I mean, it's a very small town out our direction. We're in about the Sacramento area here. Usually about 2.5 hour drive. Well, maybe about 2 hour drive east of Sonoma Raceway. It's kind of our area, but that would be it. Oh, the car that SVG won with is the same one Suarez won with at Sonoma? I did not know that, Donnie. Thanks for bringing it up. Wow. I did not know that. That is exciting. That's exciting. I didn't know that. I'm seeing 4 votes for drivers. Yeah, drivers is a driver's day. Okay, yeah. Willie B, very good point. We'll do drivers here for the category. Yeah, well, it was definitely better in Crystal Skull. I never saw Crystal Skull. I saw it, but I saw the Red Letter Media review, so I feel like I've seen it. And yeah, this was better. It's a begrudging better. It's not very good. But I'll be perfectly honest. I'm probably not the best person to review it because George Lucas was not a big factor in my childhood. Honestly, I was just as much of a NASCAR geek back then as I am now. I'm big into movies in general, especially like mid '90s onward. I was much more raised by I love Die Hard and Speed and Twister and just movies like that. I didn't really kind of gravitate towards like George Lucas movies. I was not big into Star Wars. I was not big into Indiana Jones. I was not big into really any of that. Didn't hate it. I just didn't grow up with it. Basically at that age. I mean, I was born in '82, so it was I was first of all too young for when they first came out. For talking Star Wars, but I was into. Let's see, what was the order? I was trying to think of this the other day. What was the order of things I was into? It was probably Ninja Turtles, then Thomas the Tank Engine, then the Titanic. Definitely got some thoughts on the Ocean Gate thing for sure. Probably won't fit on the show here, but yeah. Then NASCAR. Titanic was right before NASCAR. And then Ocean Liner history. Train history, that's more Last Bros thing. I kind of had a little bit of that, but he's much more into that. He's more canny when it comes to that. But those are probably my bigger interests. And then in between all of that, I like action movies, especially action movie soundtracks. So there's a lot of movie soundtracks is probably right between Titanic and NASCAR because I always like movies with good soundtracks. So again, Star Wars and Indiana Jones have good soundtracks. I got no problem with that. John Williams is an artist. He's massive. I've always been much more into like Hans Zimmer soundtracks, Days of Thunder, Mark Mancina, who did let's see, he did Bad Boys, he did Speed, he did Twister. Those are great soundtracks. Jerry Goldsmith did The Ghost of the Darkness and Air Force One. Those are great soundtracks. We'll probably do something on that one of these days here. But yeah, that would be kind of it. Ninja Turtles goes way back, way back. That's probably the first thing I remember being into as a kid. Probably Disney before that. I was into the Disney Renaissance movies, so that would be like mid '90s too. So that's kind of a crossover there. I mean, we went to Disneyland as a kid and all that. I mean, that was kind of a thing with all that. But Yeah. I mean, anything, what, Little Mermaid to The Lion King would be kind of the gap there. I mean, those are like the big ones everybody always talks about. Anything Toy Story and after is a little bit too new for me. Yeah, that was kind of different there. I guess you have kind of a lot of interests that kind of overlapped each other, but, kind of different ones there. Ed Kalehoff. Yeah, there you go. There's another composer, too. Yeah, there's another one. Yes, Jim M. Thank you for bringing that up, too. Yeah, Transformers. Transformers are cool, too. I remember the GoBots, the really small ones. Those are always fun. I liked the features of those, but I kind of fell off of that probably around NASCAR, probably mid-90s, early 90s, mid-90s, thereabouts. Just like Ninja Turtles didn't last too long. Yeah, Days of Thunder 2. I love the spirit. I like that if the guys that are involved, if Tom Cruise is involved for sure, and the people that were behind Top Gun Maverick, because I like Top Gun Maverick way more than the first one. I wasn't really that big into Top Gun. It's okay. It's got cool lines. I'm not the biggest fan of it, but I loved the second one. Oh God, the second one was tremendously enjoyable. I love movies like that are just so much. They're fun. They're inspiring. They're not too complicated. They're simple. And they're just, and they got a great soundtrack. I mean, Lady Gaga did a great job working on that. I didn't realize how much her soundtrack was kind of merged into the Harold Faltermeyer soundtrack in that. That was incredible. It deserved to get every Oscar nomination it got because it was just a well-made thing. It was just a well-made film. It seems so rare to have that these days. It doesn't have to be in a cinematic universe or anything. Days of Thunder, I mean, it's gonna have to be right though. I'm afraid I'm gonna be pickier with Days of Thunder because that's like the movie that got me into NASCAR for sure. And I can't hold it to that standard. It's not going to be. It's impossible. It's impossible for it to be better in the first one in my mind. It just is. I mean, it could be a great movie, but it's never gonna beat that. It just isn't. I love that first movie. I mean, my goodness. And what they did with like the actual wrecks and bringing the actual cars out and Hendrick being involved in it and footage from the 90 Daytona 500 and the soundtrack and the sound design and just how they made the sport look. It's such a wonderful way to bring people into the sport. I think it's a rite of passage for anybody that's a new fan of the sport. I think it's something that they should experience very early in following it if they're interested in racing. I think it exudes the spirit of the sport, and it does play fast and loose with physics and how many gears are in a transmission, all that. And I've already made a video on this where I mispronounce hyperbole, but it's not. It's already it just is, and I think in some ways I hold unrealistic standards of different races these days to that. But I think it's also it captures the spirit of it so well in a way that maybe not everything in modern NASCAR does. So that is a tall order to do that. I don't think a new one would accomplish that, or certainly not the same way. So it probably shouldn't even try to do that. I'd love it if it had the same grit, if they committed to as much practical effects like they did in Top Gun. I mean, obviously they had a lot of CGI to work in it. That's going to be a part of it. But there was a lot that they did, in person that you can tell. It just looks incredible. If they do that same percentage of it with this, I just don't want it to look cartoony or stupid. I don't want it to be like Talladega Nights. I don't want it to be like Herbie Fully Loaded. I don't want it to be all, silly, goofy stuff. I don't want it to make the sport look bad. I don't want to make the sport look stupid. Basically, the same standards I hold for the broadcast. If it makes the sport look awesome, if it makes it look epic, if it's a proper response to, to Drive to Survive, which itself has become a meme, it's going to have to be better than that. I'm afraid I am going to hold it to that standard. But am I going to hold it to the standard of being better than the first one? No. I don't think that's fair. That's too lofty in my mind. It would set myself up for disappointment first and foremost. But also I think it's unrealistic. But it's going to have to be separate from those other movies for sure. But I'd love it. I'd love to see it. I would be there. As I said, I would be as hyped. The most hyped I was for a movie in recent years. I'm very big into disaster films. That was linked into being interested in the Titanic. And of course when Titanic came out in 97, I was in high school, And me and AJ, who's this guy on the basketball team, he and I just geeked out about like the history of it because I'd already been interested in it since I was like 8 years old. And he was really into the movie, and we kind of just loved talking about the Titanic. And we put together like a book of just like all the statistics and information we could, and that was always a lot of fun. So those were good times. Those were good times. But connected to that, I've always been into like disaster films and disaster films. I might do a video on this at some point, maybe just as like a Patreon thing or something like that. But the disaster film is a very specific kind of film. It's not a film that has a disaster in it. It's like about it, and it's about like escaping it. And I think the best example of it is The Poseidon Adventure, 1972. Probably one of the best movies ever. I'm losing a lot of people viewing on this, but that's okay. We're getting into really, really ridiculous stuff here anyway. The later part of the show here is always a bit looser here, folks, that's for sure. But I love The Poseidon Adventure. And when I found out in 2005 that they were remaking it, Wolfgang Peterson was doing it, and Klaus Badelt was doing the soundtrack, and they brought in like Kurt Russell and Josh Lucas, I was so excited. Oh my God, I was so excited. And this is like well after I graduated college, and I was still geeking out about it there. And I loved it. I saw it May 12th, 2006 was when the new Poseidon Adventure premiered. And I saw it at the Metreon in San Francisco. And it was huge. I was the only one applauding at the end because, yeah, it was kind of clunky. But every disaster film is flawed. But it's never meant to be high art. It's meant to be pure spectacle. And, kind of like Top Gun, but it's well-crafted spectacle. And that was one I really enjoyed. But that's the last time I was really hyped about a movie, for sure. And I enjoyed it. I had a great time. I got it on DVD. I got it on Blu-ray. It's on that shelf right back there. But yeah, it's that was definitely big. But Days of Thunder, if they remade that would be at the exact same level of hype, for sure. Oh yeah, for sure. But that would be another one too. Major League 2, First Blood. Yeah, see, here we go. Here's some other good movies too, for sure. But that would be another one here at the same time. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's gonna be different already. I mean, because we don't have Bob Jenkins. Bob Jenkins did the broadcast play-by-play. I'm sure that's where I started really admiring him and his work and all that. So that was big too. But yeah. Oh yeah, Mission Impossible. Yeah, those are. I mean, I'm excited about the one that's coming out here. I guess they're doing 2-parters, but that would be pretty cool. Brock, a NASCAR guy in San Fran's like a redneck at a Tupac concert. Lionel, yeah, no, I've said this before, and I'm guessing you're probably new to the. Maybe I apologize if you're not new to the stream here, but yeah, I'm afraid. I've always been one of the only NASCAR fans in every social group I've been in because I've been in the Bay Area. We're now, again, Sacramento direction, and Sacramento's a ways. For those of you not from California, Sacramento people and Bay Area people are pretty different. There's different regions, but then you go down to LA, and that's a whole other galaxy down there. But yeah, pretty much in every job I've had, including the job I have now, and when I was in the band, when I was in high school, when I was in grade school, yeah, I was about the only NASCAR fan in any of those. I used to have like NASCAR shoelaces on my shoes in high school. I wore a Terry Labonte uniform shirt when I was on the crew in college. I wore I remember going to, I had a Nextel Cup schedule shirt that I remember wearing when I was in college back then. I remember I was in a sports law class in law school, and every time there was something NASCAR related that came up, like when Herschel McGriff beat his age record by starting at Portland, my professor knew about that, and he was asking me about it. And so, yeah, it was pretty much everyone that was in every single group. If something happened in NASCAR, I mean, when we lost Dale Earnhardt, my God, I got a few phone calls that day. That's how much people kind of knew of my being interested in that. It wasn't my only interest, but it was definitely the more intriguing one, I think, from being up in the Bay Area. And so Sears Point was definitely circled on the calendar every year, as it was this year, and it certainly will be next year. So that's where kind of that goes in. But just a little bit peek behind the curtain here. I know we haven't got to the driver questions here. Let me at least get a couple of those here. I apologize, we're running a little long here tonight, but an exciting evening, and I appreciate you guys tuning in here to be It's an honor to be a small part of the experience here. I'm sure no shortage of people have been on there. Yeah, take it easy. No tires, just gas. All right, here we go. Let's see. First question, under the drivers category, who won the Goodies 300 at Daytona a record 7 times? Who won the Goodies 300 at Daytona a record 7 times? Is our first question. I was going to post the Trevor Boyce video on Canada Day when it was kind of coming together in late June, but I figured with the Chicago race that there was no way people were going to be watching that. People were going to be watching the race, but my original plan was to post it on the 4th of July, actually. It'd kind of be a connection between him being a Canadian driver but getting into America. But yeah, I mean, obviously with the cancellation of the race this morning, yeah. But a big thanks to those of you in the Patreon who checked it out there, and those of you for the support. If you're interested in the Patreon, I probably should have brought this up. We have more people here in the chat. Patreon.com/LastCarOnBrock if you're interested in some bonus content, as well as some cool swag I send out to Patreon members as well. That is through patreon.com/LastCarOnBrock. Again, the question is, and it looks like a lot of you got it here, who won the Goodies 300 at Daytona a record 7 times? The answer is indeed Dale Earnhardt, the man in black. That is it. Aw, Big G, you would have been my NASCAR buddy? Right on, man. Thank you. Just like you, but 15 years later. Yep, there you go. Oh, the crew, rowing. Yep, Austin Foster. I was an oarsman in college. I got my varsity letter, UC Irvine. We competed. My last competition was actually not too far from Last Car headquarters here in Lake Natoma, May 1st, 2005. Same day Jeff Gordon won Talladega in the Star Wars paint scheme. There's a little nugget there for you. Yep, that was it. I had no athletic experience. Got invited on there because I was over 6 foot. Coach Dan Emmerich and the founder Duval Hecht brought me on board, and I got got 4 years. I got to a winning boat my 3rd year. We won 4 races that season. That was 2 seats in an 8-man boat. And I got to, I broke 7 minutes on my 2,000 meter ergometer score. I got my best score on my last ever erg in early 2005, 6 minutes, 48 seconds, which is not the fastest Olympic erg. People could do like 5 minutes, but that was never going to be the objective. But I weighed 100 pounds less than I do now at my leanest back then. But it was a great experience. I wouldn't change it for the world. It was tremendous. I still enjoy taking long distance walks because we did long distance runs back then, and that was a lot of fun. And I still hear from teammates from time to time, but it was a great experience. Yeah, a lot of early mornings though. I still have a harder time waking up in the morning than I did back then. I'll tell you what, because that was definitely it. Alrighty. Oh gosh, that was too easy. Come on, we get a better one here. Here we go. What brothers did Red Byron edge out to claim his first NASCAR championship? Get your minds out of the gutter. I know people keep saying that word in other contexts, but we're talking about a close contest of which somebody had a narrow victory. That's what we're doing. Come on, there's kids in this chat. What brothers did Red Byron edge out to claim his first NASCAR championship? Is our next question. Mike Joy or Alan Bestwick could make it work. Dale Jr. would have to be all over it as well. Yeah, I mean, that's fair. That's fair. Oh, that's right. Yeah, Herbie Suarez has a ton of Volkswagens. That's a good one, too. Dressed as Leonardo for Halloween one year when I was a kid. There you go, Kevin. Right on. Very cool. Just a classic cartoon, Death Killer. Yeah, I didn't really follow it much. That one didn't kind of keep going very much. I was just very much into the 90s culture, like the gross out culture, like Ooze and Mutagen and just kind of like all that stuff. That was always fun. I think Nicktoons probably supplanted the Ninja Turtles pretty quick because I loved Ren and Stimpy and the Rugrats and all that. And then you kind of had Rocko's Modern Life and all that. That was a lot of fun. And that it's a shame that kind of went away because I always loved the style and the coloring and the humor, of course, was always a lot of fun. But that would be another part of it. Let's see. Days of Thunder 2 production in Tennessee. Right on. Yeah, that goes pretty far back. Stroker Ace. Yeah, that's just me. Yep, there we go. Got to get that 91 card diecast. Yeah, there you go. That'll be the other thing. Yeah, well, I'll be curious what they do with that. Do we have Tech Complete there? I see that on there, Jason Toth. I'm just kind of checking your comments here from earlier. No more races scheduled for the Project 91 car. That's too bad. Hopefully something changes on that. I mean, I'm sure they didn't count on winning at the time that they planned that. In Giesbergen. See, I always want to say, I mean, I'm sure the thing that confuses people when they say Shane Van Giesbergen, you're thinking of like Ruth Bader Ginsburg. There's that, because I know when I was saying it on last week's show, I usually said Shane Van Giesberg or Gisberg because I'm thinking, or Ginsburg. I think I put an N in it a lot when I was writing it. And I was having trouble with it, especially I did the entry list thing. I think that was kind of it too. Oh, yeah, the question here. What brothers did Red Byron edge out to claim his first NASCAR championship? That is a question. Let's see. Shane made today special. Yep, absolutely. Have to agree. Just the hotel taxes in Chicago. Yeah, I can't imagine. Oh, my goodness. All right, we got guesses for the Flocks. We got, let's see, the Bush Brothers. There you go. A little different there. Consider doing the history of the Cartoon Network cars from Diamond Ridge into Melling Racing. That could be fun. That could be fun. I mean, it basically just almost be a slideshow, I think, at that point. But maybe like good runs they had or something. That would be something. Because I loved the Jetsons car that Nadu had where he led his first laps at Watkins Glen. That's one that stands out. Yeah, Ginsburg. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, hearing that all day. Sedhead too. You mentioned Candice Bergen. I'm thinking about Murphy Brown. I remember that show. I liked that show. It was kind of any of that fast talking Aaron Sorkin like writing. I always enjoyed that. What brothers did Red Byron edge out to claim his first NASCAR championship? The answer is the Flocks, indeed. The Flocks. I think a couple of you got that one. Bowser Jr. XD swinging for the fences with Bob and Fonnie. Bush Brothers. Sponge Brock. Yeah, there you go. The Flocks Death Killer. Yeah, you got it there too. Lionel Hollywood, you got it. 611 Hornet. Aaron Fontaine. Sedhead 2. Ben Schneider. Yep. You all got it. Oh, you all got it. Kevin Love, you were even earlier on that. Make a sequel to to Driven. Yeah, no thanks. Jaw, you never crawl. Okay. Let's see. Next question. What driver once broke both ankles riding a motorcycle? What driver once broke both ankles riding a motorcycle? In fact, the Flocks most recent one with the 91 win too, right? So you had that. Were you the only ones at the end of this race today, the Cup race here? Like, I thought the finish line was a straightaway before it was. When he came off, I thought the final, I mean, because it's all 90-degree turns. So I thought like the next last straightaway was the finish line. It's like, oh no, he's got one more to go. It's like, oh crap, the Haley might still get him. Just exciting. Just so exciting. What driver once broke both ankles riding a motorcycle is the question. Joe, there you go. Jimmy Bly. What driver once broke both ankles riding a motorcycle? The vertical test. Okay, here we go. And the answer is Bobby Hamilton. Bobby Hamilton is the correct answer. I didn't see that coming. I was going to guess Davey Allison. Bobby Hamilton is the correct answer. Anybody get that? Kyle Petty, Rudd, Moffitt, Waltrip, Shane Van Gisbergen, Rudd, Petty, Richmond, Vladimir Askarov, Jimmy Bly, Morgan Shepherd. Yeah, how about that? Yeah, Bobby Hamilton. There's, you can see that on the screen very well. There you go. Joe Theismann, not quite. Oh, I like this one. I like this one. Here's a potent quotable question for you folks. There we go. We'll do a couple more here to wrap up for the evening. Who complained Dale Earnhardt would give aspirin a headache? Who complained that Dale Earnhardt would give an aspirin a headache? There's your next question. Who complained Dale Earnhardt would give an aspirin a headache? Alrighty. Yeah, I'm gonna be excited. We get the screen set up here. I think I have my monitor. I have my sound machine over here, just off screen. I wonder if I can set it in front of it, because I don't really interact with this too much. It's got the sound effects and all that stuff, but I don't really do that on the show here too much. If I set it in front, that would probably work better. If I set it behind, I'll be reaching over it, and I'll probably elbow a button that's not going to work right. We'll figure something out. All right, here we go. Kenny Wallace, Darrell Waltrip, Bro Brandenburg, Benny Parsons, DW. DW, it does sound like DW, Death Killer, you're right. Let's see. No, it's not me, no tires. I know you're still in here. There you go. Who complained Dale Earnhardt would give an aspirin a headache? The answer is Buddy Baker. Wow, I didn't see that coming. Buddy Baker. That sounds exactly like a Darrell Waltrip. I was going to go with you guys with DW. Absolutely. Did anybody guess Buddy Baker? We're getting to the real hard questions. We've been doing this on the show here since the disqualification show back in, what was that, 2019? 4 years now? So, yeah. Buddy Baker is the correct answer. Yeah, it surprised me too. Alrighty. Oh, there we go. Oh, just a little bit of cleanup here on a couple of other subjects here from this weekend. Again, thoughts over to Jimmy Johnson and Chandra on devastating news from this week. Certainly hope they're doing okay. I mean, unthinkable on this. Don't really have too much really to add on that story there. So I'm sure it's close to everyone's mind here at the same time. We had the driver that we lost at Spa this week. I know he got tagged in that when people were asking about what was happening there and a dangerous corner. Again, Formula One's not really my wheelhouse here on that, but I mean, definitely the discussion of a dangerous part of a track and revisiting it there is something, something definitely that I think should be looked at. But as to what the proper solution is, I'll defer to people that are more knowledgeable on that track there in particular. And glad to hear about Simon Pagenaud, that he's okay after the wreck that he had at Mid-Ohio there yesterday. There, I got to admit, yeah, that was very frightening. That clip there that certainly showed the wreck that he had there. So it definitely reminded me. I mean, when I first saw it, I thought somebody was playing the McDuffie clip. I really did, because it just happened so fast. It just shows, I think, really between all three of those stories, I mean, it just shows, again, the risks that are inherent the sport, or just other things that just people are dealing with that you just don't know. You just don't know about. You never know what people are dealing with at one point or another, and we certainly got a glimpse of that in each of those examples there. So, yeah, definitely thoughts to with all of them in those very very different but similarly linked with motorsport stories there at the same time. Alrighty. Let's see here. We'll wrap up here with a couple of things, kind of make a smoother transition here. So I'll kind of mention here with for those of you people kind of tuning in a little bit later here in the show, we're just wrapping up here in a little bit. So other projects I'm working on here in the meantime. Next episode of 500 Days that's on Darlington is still in the works. I've actually got a pretty good lead on that script here. I'm actually watching a lot of the races from that particular weekend there to kind of add more detail to that. I think the format for those episodes is going to be a lot clearer in the episodes of that series coming up. I am still planning a 39 episode series at the moment. That number is subject to change depending on how things play out here. But that's what's planned, at least in my initial outline here. They're not going to be all done this month, this week, or likely even this year. But they're going to be kind of something that I'm going to kind of work on in the meantime, so I don't have a long lull between videos, or not as long of a lull. That was the big objective with that series. And then Rise of the Field Fillers on Larry Gunselman, Mach 1 Incorporated. That is the next episode of that series coming up. So that series is going to be continuing. I hope to have some more information on that coming up, and we'll have that those details set up there in the meantime. So we'll have some more information on that. I think both those scripts, I touched on this a little bit earlier, I think both those scripts are about the same rate in terms of getting produced. They'll probably be done about the same time, so I'll probably end up recording them around the same time. I don't really have an estimate in terms of when they're going to be completed. That depends. But I do have pictures and material provided, especially big thanks again to Brian Hallman at the BRH Racing Archives. He provided a ton of material for both of those, as he did with the Trevor Boys deal. That's why I've been very anxious to get these out so I can make best use of what was provided on there as well, and keep that going for you guys. So definitely with the Trevor Boys video today, that is only the beginning of some other stuff that I'm working on here and will have for you. And again, I hope to have more news on the Derek Cope book coming up here, including a release date. The manuscript's pretty much done. We're just kind of finishing up the cover design and so forth there, and then kind of getting an idea about what our benchmarks are going forward to getting it printed, and then we'll see how that goes. So yeah, that'll be the other part to look at. So we'll do one more question here to wrap up here for the evening here, and we'll do this. This is kind of a funny question here to kind of wrap up here. Another good quote, and I think that's a good way to wrap up the show here for this evening. So first of all here, who said he hit the wall at Bristol so hard it knocked his shoes off? Is the question. Who said he hit the wall at Bristol so hard it knocked his shoes off? By the way, I know there was a lot of concern about the concrete barriers at the street course this weekend. I'm glad that those concerns were not as prevalent there with the restructuring of the car. I mean, especially after the Ryan Blaney situation at Nashville. I'm glad that wasn't as much of a focus. Definitely a difference in speed changes that, and the wall's ability to move certainly does too. But, yeah. Who said he hit the wall at Bristol so hard it knocked his shoes off is the question. So I have a couple more questions on that there too. Okay, I'm seeing some guesses from Michael Waltrip, Mike Harmon. Whoops, it's not letting me scroll through here. I don't want to hit refresh because I don't want to... Oh, is this a refresh chat button? Okay, there it goes. There it goes. Got it. Let's see. See, a lot of guesses from Michael Waltrip. That's interesting. It does sound like something he'd say. Now, is this another teaser where it sounds like it's going to be a Waltrip, but it's going to be something else? That would be interesting. Who said he hit the wall at Bristol so hard it knocked his shoes off is the question. Yeah, I mean, is it Michael Waltrip? And is it within the context of that dramatic accident he had at Bristol in 1990? We will see. All right, here we go. I'll read it one more time, folks. Who said he hit the wall at Bristol so hard it knocked his shoes off? The answer is David Pearson. David Pearson is the correct... Whoop, let me tilt that there. David Pearson is the correct answer. I thought I saw Lionel Hollywood. You got it, man. Or right on, Lionel. Excellent, excellent. Good job. Good job. There you go. I think you were the only one that got that one. That was a tricky one. Sedhead. Yes, you brought up something else too. I do have some other news. I want to end things positively here too. Definitely with that at the same time. Yes, there is another NASCAR Man video in the works. I can confirm that. I won't go further into that because, again, that's his channel. That's his thing. I don't want to step on his toes with that. But I have read the script. He sent one to me this week. In the process of getting that recorded. So that'll probably be recorded before these next couple scripts are done. So we'll see. I'm glad you brought that up because I was thinking about recording it tonight. We'll see if I get that in. If not, probably this weekend will help with that. But yes, there is going to be another video that NASCAR Man and I are working on. Well, actually, again, I need to really make this clear. Those are videos that he's producing, he's written. I'm just the one that's fortunate enough to do the narrations for him. He has scripts that are very easy to read, very enjoyable to read, and very informative. So he is going to have some content coming up here too, and I know you guys are going to be enjoying that at the same time. So we'll get that going. So yeah, so we got 500 days. We got excuse me, Rise of the Field fillers. Got another NASCAR Man video, and I'm also kind of kicking around some ideas for some other standalones, kind of like the Trevor Boys video that came out today. So that's about it for the show tonight. I think that's a good place to leave it here, folks. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. A massive day here for NASCAR. Shane Van Gisbergen, congratulations on his tremendous victory, landmark victory, I dare say, in the Cup Series. Saw some comments earlier about inspection clear. Hopefully that's the case. Still having issues with Twitter. I can't confirm that. I don't know. Hopefully things are cool that we go forward because that's massive for the sport, for Trackhouse, and for really NASCAR's place in the international community, both in having a street course in a major metropolitan area, and then to have this dramatic victory by the only open team in the entire race, and one of the only international competitors in the field there too. So yeah. That'll be it. Our next show, let's see. Well, let me do it the right order here. Twitter feed is @LastCarOnBrock. Patreon is patreon.com/LastCarOnBrock. The website is lastcar.info. The article on Alex Bowman will be later tonight, again, pending the results of post-race inspection. Our next show for Behind the Wall will be next Sunday after the Cup Series race in Atlanta, the mutilated Atlanta Super Speedway. I'm trying to be positive about that track, but it's not one I'm a big fan of. But who knows? Maybe that race will be amazing too, and we'll be talking about it one way or the other after all that. And we'll cover the action from that track right here on the show. So thank you so much for everyone tuning in. We'll be about 15 minutes after the checkered flag that weekend. So have a wonderful 4th of July to my American viewers here. Hope you had a wonderful Canada Day for our Canadian viewers. And otherwise, just hope you're having a relaxing early summer for everybody else. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you all next week.